I'll try to keep this punchy. As I was running through this last night with my test audience, he fell asleep. So hopefully I won't have the same effect on you. Jill, do we have the presentation up? Okay, so I'm going to share 4 topics this morning. One, I'm going to explore St. Mark's financial strength by looking at the foundation upon which we operate through our balance sheet and our endowment. Second, I'd like to provide a brief update on our financial capital. I'll share an update on our capital projects utilizing the funds raised from our Empower the Parish campaign. Thirdly, I'll share a perspective on our financial health, which includes operating statement results from 2019 as well as our 2020 budget. And finally, I'll touch on the parish's financial resources of experience and oversight, and close with our financial management looking forward. So moving to the first slide, financial strength and balance sheet. At year end, we held $14.6 million in total assets. We remain in the enviable position of having a very strong balance sheet with a solid capital base, a healthy endowment, conservative cash reserves, and no long-term debt. So this places us among the top Episcopal churches in Connecticut in terms of financial strength. The balance sheet has 3 primary pillars. The purple segment on the circle on the left represents our endowments and trusts, which total $6.9 million, or about 47% of our total assets. During 2019, the endowment provided a source of income with a draw of 4%. Property, building, and equipment in light blue remains steady and represents land, church buildings, rectory, and cemetery. It totals $4.35 million, or 30% of our total assets. And finally, the dark blue and red segments represent cash and marketable securities that we hold for our operating expenditures and capital investments. We also track our accounts receivable from pledge commitments as represented in green. So looking over the last 2 years, our balance sheet has increased by 1.5% due to changes in receivables, usage of capital campaign funds, and investment performance returns. So let's take a look at the endowment now. This is a breakdown of the current asset allocation. It's overseen and monitored by the Diocesan Donations and Bequests Board and by St. Mark's Endowment Committee. The current allocation is approximately 62% equities, 31% fixed income, 3% tangible assets, and 4% cash. Now let's look at our returns. Following the 2018 decline in performance of negative 6.5%, 2020 rebounded with a return of just under 20%. So over the last 3 years, the endowment has produced over 9% in total return. Our accounts are managed alongside the endowments of the Episcopal Church of Connecticut and 120 Connecticut-based churches by U.S. Trust, who oversees the portfolio. Now let's look at our financial capital and the projects we did in 2019. Funds for the projects were raised as part of the 5-year Empower the Parish capital campaign, which ended in 2018, and through additional designated gifts. The capital expenditures do not flow through the operating budget. Almost 200 donors generously pledged $5 million towards our campaign to invest in infrastructure and endowment and to support the needs of our parish. $3.8 million of projects have been funded, including the $250,000 that were funded this year in 2019, which was, let me point out, $9,000 less than what we had projected, so we're keeping a tight eye on our project management here. We still have $1.1 million to invest, and the money is sitting earning interest in CDs. The largest piece of the 2019 spend was for clergy housing, updating the cottage, kitchen, and some structural deficiencies, as well as replacing the rectory roof and gutters. So turning to capital projects for 2020, we anticipate spending approximately $734,000. The largest projects are investments in Gray Gables HVAC, windows, and ADA compliant entrance. And this is an ambitious capital program. We're not positive that we'll get to all of these projects, so some of them may be deferred into the future. So let's look at our financial health through the lens of our operating income. In 2019, St. Mark's earned $2.2 million in operating income, which exceeded our budget by nearly 6% and prior year by 2.4%. This excludes the preschool. We'll talk about the preschool in a later slide. So in terms of the operating income, there are 5 primary sources of income. The first is pledge payments, non-pledged gifts, and contributions from Sunday Plate, which is represented in light blue, and that's 73% of our income. Donations in red represents 11% and includes income coming from financial support of our music ministry, flowers, weddings, funerals, facility rentals, and special gifts. Our endowment represents an important 11% of our income, just over $230,000 through the annual draw from the funds. Mayfair represents 11%. And finally, interest income has provided over $28,000 in income through short-term, high-quality CDs. On the expense side, operating expenses are much more complex. We have about 49 line items. We've distilled them down to 5 categories here. More than half of the operating expenses represent compensation and benefits for clergy and staff, plus musicians, section leaders, hourly childcare workers that provide services during our Sunday services. Other expenditures include 13% for office, 12% for buildings, grounds, and maintenance, utilities and insurance, 9% for the diocesan common mission support that Father Peter mentioned, and 4% for ministries and outreach. In terms of, let's look actually at the expenses from a programmatic view, and this is the lens that our auditors use. 75% of our expenses are accrued to St. Mark's programmatic work, while 20% cover management and 5% cover fundraising. Of the 75% that covers programming, 27% goes towards worship, music, and community life. This includes pastoral care, fellowship and welcome ministries like the World's Greatest Coffee Hour and Newcomers Potlucks. 15% covers outreach and mission, including programs such as Laundry Love, Gospel Garden, and Clergy Discretionary Fund. 17% covers preschool, which we'll highlight in the next slide. And 16% covers formation, which includes activities like confirmation, adult education, youth group, and Sunday school. So turning to the preschool, I want to highlight that the preschool is fiscally sound and managed by its very own board. It generated over $500,000 in income and provides our parish with rental income and capital investments. The school has 13 teachers serving 64 students aged 2 to 5. And in their fiscal year ending June 30th, 2019, they generated a $96,000 surplus, $72,000 of which was used for capital investments, such as safety doors, new carpets, and improvement to our air ventilation systems. We strive each year for a balanced budget. This slide illustrates that over the last 3 years, we've added $36,000 to our reserves. If you recall, in 2017, we had a surplus, which we utilized in 2018 for one-time discretionary expenses, including Francis, our pastoral pup, long-deferred building grounds repair and maintenance, and other ministry initiatives. You can see for 2019 that we achieved a balanced budget, but as Dan mentioned, what is not included here are the $60,000 of legal fees that we've incurred. And those $60,000 of legal fees have hit our general reserves line on the balance sheet. So if you look at the general reserves column, 2018 and 2019 rows, you'll see the drop there. Adjusting for that $60,000, we would have been flat year over year. So turning to our 2020 budget. Once again, we manage expenses towards a balanced budget, and our 2020 budget was created on a bottoms-up basis by Director of Operations Jill, treasurer and staff is reviewed and approved by the Finance Committee, the Vestry, and the Executive Committee. And looking at the budget for 2020, we anticipate a 1.1% increase in spending from 2019 to 2020. Comp and benefits are increasing due to the full year of our music director, Ned Tipton, and as well as increases in healthcare spending. We're trying to reduce, keep a tight eye on expenses, and we're reducing office spending, as well as some expenses around building grounds and utilities. As Stan had mentioned, in 2018, we were given 2 generous gifts totaling $300,000 to help fund a full staff of clergy, and that gift is being utilized to offset our costs, but it is expected to run out in 2021. So we have a strong foundation and a plan for 2020, but we really need to look for the future. We need to think of a long-term solution for funding a full complement of staff and ensure that we're supporting and sustaining the needs of our parish. So I want to close, as we historically have, by acknowledging that financial management is indeed a team effort. A measure of our financial strength is the talent and time commitment made by our finance and endowment committees, our collections volunteers, our third-party service providers, banking relationships and other boards, committees and staff, including Outreach Commission, the Property Committee, Preschool Board, the Stewardship Committee, and the Vestry. And it's with sincere and grateful thanks that we commend their service and support. In particular, I'd like to thank Kathleen Corbett. She has served as treasurer over the last few years and has mentored me as I've taken on this role. And I want to thank her for the amount of time that she's put into ensuring sound financial management of the church. Thanks. So looking ahead, Dave Clow has agreed to act as assistant treasurer, which I'm very excited about. This year we'll be reviewing the Finance and Endowment Committee memberships and updating the charters. We'll be conservatively managing expenses to maintain a balanced budget. And most importantly, we'll be working on the long-term financial planning for the church. Like Stan, I'll be happy to take questions after the meeting, or if you want to reach me via email, I'm happy to speak as well. Thanks.